Good morning, everyone. Good evening in France. Today is the Essence Day. Essence is a raw black. We'll talk about raw blacks in general, and we're going to have a great session today. We love this tea, and hopefully you'll be able to appreciate it as well. So let's talk about things that occurred in the shop this week. So one of them is we're working hard with the Chinese farmers already. And what we're trying to do is get some things nailed down in terms of new orders and in terms of understanding what the crop looks like this year. So we're getting both great news and bad news. In the far south, the news we're getting is that they didn't start picking until quite late. I knew they had some snow in February, which didn't negatively affect the crop, but now they're starting, and let's define far south for you so you understand what I'm talking about. I'm really talking about Yunnan province when I'm mentioning far south. It's actually southwest China. The second thing that came up this week is they had a cold snap in Anhui. So we don't know yet what the green tea is going to look like, but usually a cold snap at this time for the very first picking is usually not a good thing. We're still in discussion. We're still learning more information. So those are the two main things. But on top of that, something came out this week when Xiaobei and I were talking with the farmers, and afterwards we reviewed what came out, and we thought we'd share it with you because I think that sometimes there is the thought that, oh, if the Chinese say something is top grade, we accept it based on the words, and we move forward, and we either like it or we don't like it. This is not accurate. The Chinese sensibility for taste, the Chinese palate are different than the American palate. So actually we mediate both markets. So when the Chinese tell us, it's always a signal to us to be especially alert when the Chinese farmers tell us or Chinese tea experts tell us, oh, this tea is a premium tea according to Chinese taste. Well, as it turns out, while of course I am interested in what our hosts are drinking, from the American marketplace, I don't care because I'm more interested in what you've liked, and I'm more interested in getting things along the program of what you like. So as it turns out also, you all have very expensive tastes. You like really, really interesting and small craft teas. So that's the path we continue to be on. No change in terms of our strategy this year. We will continue to focus on some new teas, and we will backfill every tea that it is appropriate to backfill. Now that's a big old mouthful. Appropriate to backfill. What do I mean by that? So some of the teas are very popular here. And if I don't have them in stock, then you come and you question my ability to run a tea shop, as you should. And so therefore, those are the appropriate to backfill teas. And we focus a lot on those. In addition to those, though, we're estimating that we're going to get 30 to 50 new teas. That's the target for this year. And we're going to order heavier in terms of volume of those new teas, probably about 25% per tea heavier than we would normally order. And again, this is a protective strategy, given that everybody is behaving, in a way which is not friendly, and we want to make sure that we have good teas set up for you for as long as we can do that. So that's kind of what's going on with that. All right. Outside of that this week, there were a lot of interesting things in terms of new people coming in and ordering teas and ordering different teas, including people who came in and ordered in ways that were unexpected to us. But that's for another session. Let's focus on essence and let's focus on raw blacks. So remember, in this shop, we have two types of black tea. And actually, it's not two types of black tea. Black tea is the overall category. So when we say black tea, whether it is fully fermented or it's about to undergo fermentation, what we're talking about is fermentation. Fermentation as being the primary driver of the early process of the tea. Now you notice I used a lot of qualifiers in there. Have to use qualifiers in there because we're learning, and actually we've known, but we're understanding in a better way that oxidation still plays a part in all black tea. It's just a prominent later part. It's not an early part. The early part of all black teas is fermentation. Fermentation, as a reminder, is a microbial process. So it's either bacteria, fungi, yeast, molds, working on the tea leaves. And I said working, actually consuming or digesting the tea leaves would be a little bit more accurate. Versus oxidation. Oxidation is a chemical reaction. Strictly speaking, it's you expose the innards of a leaf to oxygen, and that oxygen works on the compounds in the leaf. In fact, it changes the compounds in the leaves and causes a change in flavor profile, in color profile, in catechin profile, all of those things. So that's the overall box you should remember black teas, true black teas, fermented teas. So I just said there's two types of black teas. One is the full, and let's go down to a subcategory. The subcategory being purer tea. And purer tea has artificially composted, and then it has composting, not composting, but fermentation that occurs naturally over the years. 30 to 70 years would be really the amount of time to be fully fermented. And so I ask you this as a reminder, is fully fermented that's artificially composted, is that going to taste the same as a tea that's been fermented over a 30 to 70 year period? The answer is no. There will be differences that you and I can distinguish. And that's why if you ever have an opportunity, if you're ever a guest somewhere and somebody says, oh, you know, I got this 60-year-old cake, do you want to try that? And it's a started out as a raw black, or would you rather have a brand new tea that we scored this year? Tell the person who asked that question, you know what, I'll be polite. I'll take the older stuff. And the older stuff by cake, when it's stored properly, is worth at least $10,000 US. And sometimes much more, especially if it has good pedigree, so to speak. So what we're going to talk about today is the raw black. The raw black is somewhere in that journey. So the journey from being unfinished tea and we'll talk about that term in a minute, to being aged, it's somewhere in that aging process, 30 to 70 years. Now, we feel, by the way, that if it's a loose leaf raw black, especially the way we store it, we think that that process to get that really aged feeling from the tea is going to be significantly less than 30 years. We can't tell you what significant means here. We're guessing maybe in the 15-year, maybe it's 20 years, maybe it's 12 years. We don't know. But I'm pretty sure it'll be closer to the 20 than the 12. All right, so let's first talk about unfinished tea, because I use that term. Sometimes I use the term 70% tea. And in Chinese literature, you'll see the term Maocha, M-A-O-C-H-A. And it refers to exactly what I'm about to describe to you. So it's the process, let's see how I'm doing. I'm still doing okay. It's the process of you have to make a first decision. What are you going to pick? Is it going to be a first pick? Is it even going to be a spring pick? Or is it going to be a fall pick? Are you picking old tree? Are you picking ancient tree? So those are decisions because your picks may be different. Are you picking terraced tea, plantation tea, monoclonal tea? So all of these are decisions in the farmer's head. And there's all different values assigned to each of those types of teas. Obviously, the monoclonal is the least valuable when it's picked. The old tree is more valuable, and ancient tree is the most valuable. So there's lots of reasons for that, and we'll get into those. But let's go back to the Mao Chop, because we're still talking about the 70% tea you pick. And usually, if you're going to process it as a raw black, you're going to get a bud and 3 leaves. Sometimes you might get 4 leaves, but it's going to be 3 or 4, usually. Secondly, you're going to wither. And you're going to do 2 types of withering. Withering, if you're in the mountains, if you are working with indigenous peoples, that's always going to be a combination of outside and inside. You're going to have both things going on at the same time. Usually the withering starts outside and then it moves inside. Why would you move it inside? Well, as a farmer, you're looking at these leaves withering. And by the way, they're on bamboo outside, usually. Sometimes they have it on a cloth outside, but it's getting sunlight. That's the main thing. Gotta have sunlight. You aren't withering if it's raining. You aren't withering if it's foggy. You're withering only if there's significant sunlight. So you wither, and what are you trying to do? You're trying to remove moisture from the tea leaves. And how much moisture do you want to remove? There's no exact answer. There's a range. Usually you're trying to remove about 1/4 to 1/3, sometimes a little more than that, depending on what your recipe is as a farmer. And you're not in a hurry to do this. The sun works at its own speed. You can't crank up the sun and you can't slow down the sun. It works at its own speed. However, what you can control as a farmer is whether you wither outdoors or wither indoors. You're going to do both. Why would you move it indoors sooner? Wow, that sun is aggressive. It's sending a lot of ultraviolet waves and these tea leaves withering too fast. Let's get it indoors. The withering indoor is a controlled temperature. And again, farmers control at different temperatures, and it's controlled humidity. Is there a case where you wither both outdoors indoors and then back outdoors again. Absolutely. Because your eye as a farmer is always on that weather. Yesterday or this morning, lots of ultraviolet. This afternoon, we've got high clouds and we've got a screen a little bit, but let's put those things back outdoors. So step one. Step two, what do? Once you've withered to the degree that you think as a farmer, based on not only a judgment about the varietal, but what happened this year in terms of weather? How do I understand how things grow this year or grew this year? So you're using all of those, you're putting it in the big computer, and you're making decisions based on that. So the next decision, once you say, oh, we're done, enough moisture out of there, pliable, oh, we love pliable because we don't like working with leaves and shredding them. You know, my customers don't like shredded leaves. The shredded leaves, I mean, if you like shredded, you should be buying leaves from Kenya, where they've got those big CTC machines, crush, tear, and crumble. Oh, and those go on tea bags. So they want to preserve the leaf as much as possible, and by making it pliable through the removal of moisture, this is the relationship of why they do that. All right, sun-dried, what's next? Well, if it were green tea, we'd fire up that wok, and we'd fire up that wok to 300 or 400 degrees, get that fire underneath there just ferociously hot. But wait a minute, this is not green, black. Okay, raw black. Maybe we should only fire it up to about 200 degrees. Now, why do we fire it up in the first place? And why is there a difference in temperature? We fire it up in the first place because we have the avowed mission, should we accept it as farmers, to go ahead and remove the green enzyme and also to denature the oxidative enzyme. But wait a minute, we're using two different temperatures. Let's see, with green tea, 300 to 400, we're actually frying it for longer because the unfinished tea, we're frying for a relatively short time. Why is there a difference? Because we don't want to kill or denature the oxidative enzyme entirely. We want to disable it greatly, but we don't want to kill entirely. Because later on in the process, that oxidation needs to step up and play a role. The other thing we don't want to kill is all the microorganisms on the tea leaves. Very important. If you fry it at 300 or 400 degrees, fry it for 15 minutes, are any microorganisms going to be able to survive? Well, if they do, it's a very small number, a very tiny number. By doing it at 2 to 225, you actually put quite a few, and a short amount of time, by the way, quite a few of the organisms in stasis. Stasis is good when it comes to raw black. After you've fried, you lay it out and you divide it up on baskets that are bamboo baskets that are cross-hatched. And then you get the smart, experienced tea workers to actually knead the tea. You don't invite somebody like me. If you invite somebody like me, what you've already decided, okay, this quarter pound that I'm going to give him, we have to subtract from the value of the crop. But we can't do that until he leaves, because there's a special skill that these farmers have in kneading it. They do it faster than I do. They do it better than I do. They do it without tearing up the leaves. It's hilarious to look at my rolled stuff and then look over at the farmer's rolled stuff, and my stuff is all broken up, you know, tears and rents in the leaf itself. You look over at the farmer's, wow, beautiful. I was trying to use the same hand motion. What happened? What happened was 25 years lack of experience versus 25 years of that experience. And so we always imagine, and several times over the years, people said, yeah, we can buy Camellia sinensis plants here. We can grow, oh, this will be great. We'll make our own tea. How exciting. Well, it's exciting until you understand that if you don't have the skill level, you're not going to make something drinkable. Yes.
An unfinished tea, this seems like this is a lot of finishing.
For an unfinished tea, this seems like it's going through a lot of finishing. And this commentator was very subtle. I love the subtleness of your telling me you're thirsty. And so I understand how thirsty you are. And I'm going to bring the tea master in right away, because if I'm working with this tea unfinished, will end up being a long, long time. So we'll bring the tea master in, and then I will finish it later. And without further ado, let me bring Xiaobei, the tea master.
大家好 ，Good morning， 早上好，大家好。I do love black tea today, so it's called 生普，生普 ，yeah. So 呢 ，yeah, in Yunnan, so John and I, so I use the glass too. It's similar. Okay, so everybody understand my style, So familiar my style, two glass, so it's my style. We can strainer, yeah, prepare, So right now, so I take a 175 temperature.
Okay, so you see the tableau, 2 glasses, 1 strainer, 1 toy, and a cup that's going to transfer the water into the glasses. There are 5 grams in your package, and we're going to end up with 170-degree water. Tea master draws 175 first, and then she's going to dissipate the steam, aerate the water.
This I recommend same me so on the center, so straight. So yeah, so same me so clean.
So what she's going to do is heat up the cups, make sure that they're absolutely clean, no soap stains or anything on them. I know everybody starts with the best of intentions, but we want to double check. And this has the further benefit of when you transfer tea leaves to the cups, they will heat up and start the process of getting themselves ready to, both from an aroma perspective and from a taste perspective. So the tea master is drawing that 175. I said she was going to aerate a minute ago. She didn't do it. Instead, she used it to do the correct step, which was to make sure that the cups are clean. Now she's getting ready to aerate. And I like to call this structuring the water. And by the way, you probably didn't realize that there's correct posture. Just a minute ago, she showed you the correct posture for doing this too. She always reminds me when I'm not demonstrating with correct posture. All right, so she's aerating or structuring the water. And realistically, several things are going on here. One is, of course, lowering the water temperature. The second thing is making the water behave in a way that the flavor outcome will be brighter. And that's what, when I say aerating and structuring, that's really what's going on here. And you notice she's not in a hurry. She'd rather get it right than rush through this process. All right, she's taking her baggie. This is a demonstration. You're not doing this yet.
But one more time, this is my style. So if people like it, so you can similar me.
So she wants to make sure if she's going to air, it's going to be on the side of cooler rather than hotter.
Hot.
What that does is promotes a brightness of flavor. She puts the tea leaves in. Shakes them up. Smells. And she's using her hand in a way, it looks magic and mysterious. It's not. What it is it's a reminder of what 170 or less feels like. And this is why you do those hand motions. It isn't just because it looks pretty or it looks like, she's trying to put some juju into the tea. Has nothing to do with that. There's a real reason. All her motions during tea preparation, and it's 2 minutes, that's right. All her motions have a reason. I've set the timer for 2 minutes. You take a look at how beautiful this is. So you have some of the leaves on top, you have some stretching up to the top, and you have some floating up to the top. It's a beautiful, beautiful tea. All right, and she put water into the other cup because you want to keep that cup hot. So you can put any temperature of water in here between 170 and 212, because this isn't going to be the tea liquor water. This is simply to keep the cup hot. All right, so we're finishing up a little faster now in terms of the process for this unfinished tea. So we've talked about the heat applied. We've talked about why there are differences. We're kneading the tea. What do we do when we knead the tea? We expose the innards of the tea to air, and we also shape the tea. Is the exposure of the innards create a lot of oxidation? No, a little bit of oxidation, but that's not the real thing that they're trying to do here. Shaping is more important. The last step is actually to sun dry again. So you put this mess of leaves that have been kneaded, you put them out carefully on bamboo or cloth, and here you must use the sun. So you have to wait. If it's raining or foggy, you have to wait until it's not. And then you get those out there. And depending on the intensity of the sun, that's how long you're going to actually wither them again. So what does the withering do? All right, 2 minutes is up, and we'll leave you to think about what withering does, a second withering. So everything is deliberate here. You notice the tea master is pouring carefully, wants to get it all, and wants to get it all out of the primary glass. Because if you leave water in there, it'll continue to steep. Do you want a second cup that has a little steeping and a lot of steeping? The answer would be no. All right, so the color is as follows. And from my perspective, this is a little bit green and a little bit yellow. So this is about what the color of yours should be. It's very transparent And let's see, if you look closely, oh yeah, there's all sorts of little hairs in there. And so the first step here is to get some sensibility of what you're going to be drinking. So you smell. And remember, this was done at 170, so you can carefully put your nose in. Smell good. Oh, I'm not supposed to signal. Sorry, I didn't mean to signal that. Next, smell the tea. And then take a 170-degree sip. You coat your tongue, and you're going to notice a dichotomy right away between the smell of the tea leaves and the actual taste of this. But are we focusing on taste and smell? No, we're focusing here on the quality arena. So we're talking about thickness or thinness, smoothness or edginess. We're talking about how our mouth feels, whether you're getting an upper palate reaction, a tongue reaction, sides of the mouth reaction. Some people sometimes get a teeth reaction. You're talking about aftertaste after you swallow. And then you're talking about this ever elusive energetics. Remembering, of course, there are no rules about energetics. Everybody is different. And so you're all going to have some slight differences, sometimes some dramatic differences in how you feel. And usually by energetics, we're talking about is it feeling warming, cooling, centralizing, calming. Those are the things which fall into energetics. We're not, I don't want to hear, oh, the chi is floating out of my head. This may be true, but this is not the energetic that I want to hear in here, because I'm really looking for those sensations that everybody as a group can appreciate. Now, because I want to verify what my initial impression was, I take a second 170-degree sip. Okay, I've got in my head a really good idea of what this tea is. So I'm now going to have you brew along with the tea master.
In China, do the Chinese rinse raw black as part of the brewing process?
Oh, this is a great question. So the questioner says, in China, is a rinse of the leaves the usual standard procedure? And the answer would be, depends where you are. So in Yunnan, the answer is typically not. They do not rinse unless they know for sure that there's something, in other words, pesticides were used or something unpalatable is there. And remember, we're dealing with ancient tree. So with ancient tree, you don't have pesticides, period. You don't have any real reason to rinse. And so in Yunnan, they actually laugh about it, because in some other provinces, they actually rinse everything. And it's like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you waste any portion of this tea? And there's no reason from a flavor profile. You know, sometimes some people say, well, rinsing is really to open up the tea leaf. You don't need to open up this tea leaf. The tea leaf was fully open when it got to you. And rinsing isn't going to accomplish a better flavor with this. So the answer is no in Yunnan, yes in some other places, simply because they don't have a good understanding of where the tea came from. And they do things out of habit rather than really knowing the reason why. All right, so you're along with the tea master, aerating or structuring the water, dissipating the heat. If you're using 170-degree water, don't worry about that. You still structure it a little bit. And then you take your baggies. Baggie number 1 marked essence. I may not have told you where this is from. This is from the Ilau Mountains. That's obviously in Yunnan. Remember all that hand motion there? That's not magic. That's not her putting a spell on the tea. That's testing the temperature of the glass to make sure that she's used the right water temperature. So this is really important. And by the way, you put 2 minutes on. This is really important because when you're serving tea to guests, for example, you have a couple opportunities to rectify errors and sometimes unknown errors. So sometimes if you've used the wrong temperature of water, if you grab the glass and you use 200, whoa, but you don't say that out loud. That's an internal, whoa, what happened here? And then before you serve, you either, throw fairy dust in everybody's eyes and kind of get rid of the cup, or you just say, the thermometer isn't working, and you try again. So all of these hand motions have a distinct purpose, and it's really to save you from making an error, particularly if you have guests coming over or you're serving guests.
The sleeves are really quite long.
So one of the commentators says the leaves are really long, with the implication, are you sure these are tea leaves? Well, when you taste it, yes, I'm sure it's tea leaves. And actually in Yunnan, and I sent you a picture of the gigantic nature of some of these leaves. This is really tea. It's really of that genus, and it's really of that family, and it's really of an appropriate varietal. So and the trees are beautiful, and they're so varied because some of the trees really do have enormous leaves. Some of the trees, as big as the tree is, the leaves don't match what you think they should be for the size of the tree. And again, those are varietals. The other thing about this, and this is really important in Yunnan, is scientists, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's okay, this is an important point. Scientists are still finding new varietals, and these tea trees are really important in terms of preserving the history of tea and also using it as a way to develop better tea over time. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So timer is off, not in a hurry. You're separating the tea leaves from the tea liquor. Nice and deliberate. You're getting all that tea liquor, not leaving anything in there. Because remember, you can make 2 more cups from this. Second one, 1 minute. Third one, 1 minute. All right. And so you're going to go through the normal process, which is to first smell the leaves. Remember, I said there's going to be a dichotomy, so you do that. And this is 170-degree smell, so you can actually get your nose in there. You take a look at these leaves. These leaves are good.
Can you speak to the photo or about the photo of the large tea leaf in the hand?
Yes. So the question is, what is that large leaf in that farmer's hand? That large leaf does come from that forest area. It is, that one could be essence because some of those trees are producing leaves that large. Not every single tree in that grove is producing it that large, but it is just simply amazing because when you see that, and that's why I wanted to have that in the, or we want to have that in the set of photos, because people generally speaking think of the leaves as really tiny, but the varietals, you have all sorts of shapes. You have long and thin, you have wide and fat, you have tiny and roundish, you have with spikes coming out of leaves. Remember, 7,500 different varietals in China. Every sort of leaf size and shape, really interesting. All right, so you're going through this quality arena, you're trying this tea, it's 170 degrees, so you take that type of a sip. And while you're thinking about this, I'll wrap up the unfinished tea. And that, or the 70% finished tea, in this case it's 90%. What's left to do is to wilt it one more time, and what you're really trying to do, and this is outdoors exclusively, is to bring those microorganisms out of stasis so that they can start to do the fermentation process. So after you have wilted them sufficiently, then you have a couple more steps, but they're very minor steps. One is to sort, and the second one is to make a decision whether to put in a cake or a brick or leave it loosely. Yes.
Delicate, elusive sweetness in the aroma. Pleasurable thirst quenching swallow. Don't detect astringency.
Pleasurable, thirst quenching swallow in the aroma, hints of sweetness, no immediate detection of astringency. Great comment. You entered the right way for this tea. This tea is a big surprise when you think about, well, I've had raw black before, and sometimes it's got a more aggressive profile. This does not have an aggressive profile. Yes.
Dry leaves have a slight minty berry aroma, but the wet leaves were reminiscent of fresh mountain air, clean, floral, light perfume.
Commentator notes the light perfume, fresh mountain air of the wet leaves. The dry leaves for this commentator had just some slight hint of berry. And really, I think the berry / sweetness is what's being picked up on here. So this is a great call out, because what the commentator is saying is, wow, I'm going through the quality arena and I detect certain aromas at the start, but the wet, it's really a surprise because it's something distinctly different.
Steep leaves had a strong, sweet vegetal scent. Tea liquor is much more subtle.
Great catch here. Wet leaves, strong, sweet, minty.
Vegetal.
I'm sorry, vegetal scent. The tea liquor itself is much more subtle, and it's harder to pull all of that out. And this is really true. That's what I meant by the dichotomy between the wet leaves and the tea liquor itself. It's a very distinct difference.
Yes, slight sweetness with modest vegetal flavor. And another commentator gets also subtle, light sugar, floral essence, very subtle at first, and then as it cools down, it becomes more apparent in its full, rounded flavor.
So we're getting slight hints of sweetness, getting slight floral initially, but then as it cools down, more of a fullness of all of that, more of a rounded, bigger flavor. And I like this because, yeah, first impression is it's really smooth and it's really, really good. As you drink down into it, boy, this is not just really, really good. This is big and the flavors seem to compound on themselves.
Somebody else gets a hint of an aromatic woods, faintly floral, and then body feel, calming. Calming my oncoming migraine, settling my stomach. Softness and strength of this tea is exactly what I needed this morning.
Oh, that's great. So we have an energetics comment here about calming to the degree that an incipient migraine headache is dissipating, making the stomach relaxed, and just this sense of groundedness and centeredness from this tea. Also in this comment, from a flavor, I believe it was flavor profile to start off.
Yeah, somebody else just merged a comment.
Oh, okay.
Somebody else had got
The
hints of an
vegetal-
aromatic
okay.
woods.
Aromatic woods.
Yeah.
I
and
love that.
Yeah.
With-
faintly floral.
Hints of the vegetal, perfect comment. Because remember, this is from a forest, and you're getting that, a reflection of that in this tea.
The leaves have darker brown or color before steeping. Is the color change only due to wetting the leaves, or is something flowing off the leaves on the first steeping?
So this is an interesting question. The questioner asked, when you first looked at the leaves, pre-contact with water, they were lighter,
They were darker before steeping.
darker before steeping. Okay, got it backwards. Lighter after steeping. And so the questioner's question is a deep question. On the surface, the question is simple. Is there something flowing off the leaves that's creating a lightness? In other words, is there a drift of compounds coming out of the leaves which are creating the lightness? And so the answer to that is, of course, yes. So you are getting the drift of some of the compounds we've talked about before. So the chlorophyll is in the tea liquor, and the catechins are also in this tea liquor, and both of them have a relationship to color. So that's why you're seeing a difference. There's probably other compounds, and that's why I say on the surface this seems like a simple question. It really isn't, because from a scientific point of view, a scientist would be standing here and shaking his head and said, is that it? Isn't there anything else going on? And the right answer, there's two right answers to that. And I know both of them to be true. One of them is, I don't know. The second is, of course, there's more things coming out. But precisely what those are, I don't know, or I don't remember, or a combination of both.
I get sort of a full mouth viscosity, and it's warming. In fact, my cheeks are starting to blush.
Full mouth viscosity for this commentator, and it's warming, so much so that this commentator's cheeks are getting those little red spots in them.
Another commentator observes that this settled her stomach as well. Full mouth feel with drying on the tip of the tongue.
Another commentator has drying on the tip of the tongue, very calming and settling. And we're going to have to go back to those comments in a minute, because there's something I want you to understand about, because we've heard several comments about soothing, settling, calming, grounding, and there's reasons for that. But let me hear a few more comments and then we'll get back to that.
Soft floral aftertaste really lingers.
Soft floral aftertaste really lingers. And I like the choice of words here. All of you have been hinting around this softness. This tea is absolutely soft and mellow. And by linking that softness with an aroma, I love that too, because it isn't an aggressive, oh, this is big lavender here, or oh, this is big jasmine here. No, It is soft and subtle and not overwhelming at all. It's part and parcel of a well-balanced connection or conglomeration of flavors.
There's the viscosity, it's a wet viscosity, not an oily feeling.
Oh, very great comment. A wet viscosity versus an oily feeling. You're very correct on this. You don't have any sense of oiliness at all. You know, some teas leave you a sense of butteriness. There is no butteriness with this, but it is thick. And so therefore, by definition, there's viscosity to it. Good catch. All right, so part of what we've been talking about, and I love these comments related to settling and calming, dissipating onset issues, headaches, upset stomach. Why? Why is it that this particular tea might be doing this? I said that in the wrong way. Why might it be that this tea is doing this? What you said it's doing. But why might it be doing this? Well, I've already given you a little bit of a clue. Ancient tree. Ancient tree, in general, from a compound standpoint, is very different from terraced bushes. That's one reason. The second reason has to do with the age of this tea. This tea is, hey babe, 这个是16年还是17年呢？16. Okay, so this tea has been aged for 6 years. So as the tea ages, you find, usually as a consumer of the tea, you get more mellow, you get these other effects, they become stronger in terms of the calming, grounding, and making you feel comfortable. So those comments are all linked together. And again, I want to show you or describe to you how I'm thinking when you made all these comments about hints of sweetness, hints of floral, soft, rounded, yet full and big. All of these are interrelated. Every single comment. There wasn't anything that wasn't in some way interrelated with this, because if I had said to you at the opening bell, oh, there's complexity to this tea, you'd have been searching for stuff. You notice I didn't say that. Instead, you found it. You found that complexity wrapped in balance. This is an extremely balanced tea. There is nothing in those comments which says, oh, it's more vegetal than it is floral. It's more sweet than it is anything else. Answer is no. It is very, very balanced. Yes.
A couple more tasting comments. The aroma and flavor remain consistent through the cup. Can't wait for the second cup.
The aroma and flavor remain consistent throughout the cup. Great, great comment. Not only consistent, but let's link that with the other comment about more full. It is consistent, but in effect, your mouth starts to detect it more fully as you drink down. Yes?
Would a wet viscosity also mean that this is thinner rather than thicker?
Now we're splitting hairs, because the reason we're splitting hairs is language. Not that you are splitting hairs. It's language around tea is hard to be authoritative. In other words, I don't want to answer yes or no to your question. For me, this is still on the thicker side, but it's not buttery. That's the best I can do. If you ask me, well, does that mean compared to some other tea, and you listed the tea and said, is it a thinner or a thicker tea than the tea you listed, well, that's something we can talk about. But to give a floating standard, very, very hard. Now, having said that, you're going to be really happy about the direction that we finally settled on this week. And that is to provide all of you more information about Chinese sensibilities about these teas. In other words, we're going to provide the way they describe the teas. You don't have to use them, but you do need to understand it. Because remember, we don't grow lychee here, and we don't grow many things here that they grow in China. And therefore, their base of operations starts with different predefinitions, so to speak. Our base starts with different sensibilities, and trying to get those two to merge, well, you'll never get them to merge unless we explain clearly how the Chinese are feeling about this stuff. So we started that process when we gave you some flavor profiles for green tea. We are going to continue that, and we're going to pick it up, and we'll list that stuff on the website to make it easier for all of you to start to get the Chinese sensibility. And from there, our discussions can still come back to, well, I see this flavor as you listed it on the website, but you know what? For me, it translates as. And then you have ability to have more of a dialogue when you have the knowledge of what they're thinking about combined with your personal knowledge of how you taste something. So we're excited to proceed in that manner. And it took us a long time to really figure out how to do it the best way for you. But I think we've settled on this, and we're looking forward to doing that with you. All right, let's see how I'm doing. Oh, I'm doing good today. Any other comments or thought patterns before I move on and wrap up? All right. So I hope you take good notes on today's tea. One of the reasons this is included with the next two teas is, although you heard me go through that process of how the tea is created, and you heard clearly the differences between this and green tea, when you think about the two, though, you should think about them as close cousins, because realistically, when you taste this, this is like a supercharged green tea in a way. And so take good notes on this. Next week, we're going to do a fabulous new green tea within this last year called Balance. This thing has been a huge, huge hit here. And we'll do this together next week. I think you're going to enjoy that. And then the last tea in this group, and that's why you should be taking notes, is Premier's Choice. Premier's Choice is absolutely, hands down, one of the premier green teas. So we're tasting a series of very related, closely related teas.
Food pairings?
Oh, food pairings. So unlike green tea, where many times you have to be much more careful about food pairings because green tea sometimes doesn't carry strong foods. This thing, very bad. Essence can carry much stronger foods. Now, I wouldn't have grilled lamb with this. I'd have this way after I had the grilled lamb. But I wouldn't be afraid to have a nice vegetable casserole with a very light hint of cheese on it. You can't have much because if you do, you will interfere with this flavor. This is also great if you're having brunch. And this is especially good if you're thinking about brunch because this tea, while calming, has some elements of stimulation as well. And therefore, you would probably usually want to drink this earlier than much later in the day. So a brunch with a quiche, again, not too heavy on the cheese, or a nice omelet, or a fruit compote. I mean, all of those would work really, really great with this tea.
Do raw black and green tea have the same caffeine content?
So this is a question that if I were driving a car and I wasn't paying attention to the road, I could have a serious accident. So let me not have that serious accident and answer it this way. Remembering it isn't so much raw black versus green tea for this tea. What it really is ancient tree versus a young green tea. And that's the comparison you got to make. Young green tea. So what is young green tea? Spring pig tea. That's going to have a much higher intensity of caffeine than this. And so real numbers, I don't know the precise numbers, but if I were to make an estimate, I would say essence is probably around 45 to 55, whereas most of the green teas, the young green teas, are going to be 55 to 65. So this is less, and it's not because it's raw black, it's because it's ancient. All right. Always love having sessions with all of you. Really looking forward to next week's session. I remind everybody that even though here in Northern California, things seem to be going well, there's still plenty of reasons to be careful out there and make sure that you don't become sick during this period. So exercise the right amount of care, drink a lot of tea, and looking forward to seeing everybody next week. Great job today, all of you. You take care now.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Terry.